This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
We all help each other all the time. We've always helped each other. Neighbors help neighbors. It's no different. We've always done this. Just because you need help doesn't mean you're helpless.
Caring for aging parents or other loved ones while working, raising children, and trying to live your own life? Wondering how to find the time for your personal health and happiness? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, the show where real family caregivers share how to be happy and healthy while caring for others. Now, here's your host, family caregiver, and certified caregiving consultant, Elizabeth Miller.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, which is part of the Whole Care Network. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. We are a show produced bi-weekly to help family caregivers integrate self-care and caregiving into their lives. Each of our shows has an accompanying show notes page so that we can put all of the resources and the products and the topics and everything that we're talking about in one spot. So just head to the website, happyhealthycaregiver.com. Underneath the podcast menu, click the episode number or the image for today's show. Couple of announcements. One, if you're not on the email list, I want you to definitely get on it. We curate a lot of fabulous information and push that to your inbox every Tuesday. So join that at bit.ly/HHCE news. And then I wanted to get the message across that it is not too late to think about joining us in October of 2025 for the Self-Care at Sea Cruise. I am doing this along with several co-hosts in the care economy. This is a test to see if we can do this kind of thing, and we want caregivers to show up for the respite and to connect with other caregivers and leave with the community and resources. Or if you're just looking for a fabulous deal on a Norwegian cruise, that works too. So get that information at bit.ly/HHC Self-Care Cruise. I'd like to thank our episode sponsor, Rare Patient Voice. Do you want to earn cash in exchange for your opinion? Rare Patient Voice, or RPV, helps connect researchers with patients and family caregivers for over 700 diseases and conditions. For patients and caregivers, RPV provides the opportunity to voice their opinions to improve medical products and services while earning cash rewards. Rare Patient Voice, helping patients and caregivers share their voices. If you're interested, join the RPV panel at rarepatientvoice.com/Happy Healthy Caregiver. I read a 3-book contemporary romance series that I completely recommend if this genre is something that you enjoy. I flew through the series and I did like each of the individual books. You could read them standalone, but why not start with book 1, learn a little bit about the peripheral characters who then become the primary characters in the next book. The series was written by Abby Jimenez, and I have read and enjoyed many of her books. Book 1 is called The Friend Zone, Book 2, Happy Ever After Playlist, and Book 3 is Life's Too Short. I gave them all 4 out of 5 stars, and maybe even would give a 5-star if I didn't feel so weird about a contemporary romance book getting 5 stars. So we'll link to that in the show notes. Favorite thing that I want to share with you is I keep a digital calendar on Outlook, but I really like to see my life and my tasks in paper too. It's just more visual and tangible for me to keep my life together with the podcasts and the speaking events and the various things that are happening. I've been using the same 17-month planners for at least the past 3 years, and I just ordered mine for 2025 since it starts in this August and it goes throughout the whole year of 2025. The planner is from Natural Life. They sell way more than home and office supplies, but you may recognize their branding if you're looking for this type of thing. I like that they have this vibrant bohemian look to them. They're spiral bound that lie flat when open. They've got a hard back and they've got enough room for daily to-dos, but you can still see your week at a glance on a spread. They have fun stickers that you can splash up the pages, and I believe that you can only get them from their website, though. There are likely some great dupes out there that I need to know about, but I'm going to link to the one that I like. Let's meet today's caregiver in the spotlight. After struggling with the demands of caring for her aging mother, Paige Wilson made a bold move, leaving her corporate career and becoming an entrepreneur with a big idea to help family caregivers. In this episode of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, we learn about Paige's disruptive care solution that utilizes technology and harnesses the strength of community. We also discussed normalizing, asking for help, the longevity economy, downsizing possessions, and the self-care comfort of a McDonald's Diet Coke. Enjoy the show. Hi, Paige. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Oh, thanks. Great to be here.
So excited to have this conversation with you. And we always bookend our show with the journal at the end, the lightning round, and then a little bit of kind of kick us off in a good mindset from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you think this might pertain to caregiving or self-care. Let's see. It says, most of the shadows of this life are caused by standing in our own sunshine. And that is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's going to bring us back to high school. So most of the shadows of this life are caused by standing in our own sunshine.
Ooh, that's a very deep one. Well, yeah, I think when I think particularly as it pertains to caregiving, sometimes it feels like the shadows, right? But you do have to step out and take care of yourself first. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. Caregiving can be daunting and challenging, but at the same time, it's the greatest blessing you can have is to be there to be able to help, an aging loved one. So maybe that's the sunshine piece there.
Yeah. There's no wrong answer here. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about your caregiving story, Paige. Like what happened that made you become a caregiver in your life?
Yeah. Well, I think we're always, what is it, Rosalind Carter about, you are a caregiver, will be a caregiver, have been well, in terms of, for my parents, my father died when I was pretty young. He had a heart transplant in his 50s and died when I was in college. So I wasn't really active in that much caregiving for him. A lot of his was heavy medical. My mother was. That was a lot on her. And then she was widowed very young in her 40s and was raising my brother and I. But when she hit, and she did a great job, when she hit her mid 70s, and this was a lady that was full of life. I always say she was like Lucille Ball. She was kind of crazy. I couldn't keep up with her. She loved life. There was no question about it. She broke her hip. And all of a sudden she went from, running circles around me in the shopping mall to she couldn't drive for a little bit of time and started looking to me for some backup. It was little stuff. And I lived 5 minutes from my mom. And I was widowed young. We were both widowed in our 40s. So, I was there to help her get her to the beauty parlor, maybe set up the bridge table, that was up in the attic, all of those little things. But a couple things, I could tell that she didn't like to ask me for help. I think she didn't want to feel like a burden. She knew that I had my demanding career. I was trying to raise a teenage daughter by myself, and, she was calling on me. So that was probably the hardest part. Was it stressful for me to do all this? Yes. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to do more. And I hated that feeling that she would hesitate to ask because she just didn't want to put it on me. And that was probably the toughest part of it. Was it emotionally and physically challenging? Sure. And it started out little things. And then over time, she needed more. And I had a brother who I love dearly, but he probably created more stress than being able to rely on him, And then she eventually had home care. She
Okay.
had nurses, and a lady ended up living with her. And then she was on hospice for 2 years. So, and during that 2 year period, obviously she needed a lot of help, both from the family and from a professional caregiver. But it was kind of a long, drawn out period. So it took its toll.
Yes, you mentioned so many things. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
your story, and how perceptive of you to know that you could tell that she was uncomfortable asking for help.
Yeah.
And yet realizing that she needed it. And, she sounded like she was a really independent woman for many of her years. And like
Yes.
you said, you couldn't keep up with her. Like, was the transition of going from people helping out to home care, like something more intense, was that an easy transition for y'all?
By the time she needed it, it was fine, because I kind of feel like you take what you need when you need it. If in those early days I had tried to hire an aide or a nurse to help her, it would not have gone well, because she still felt too independent. I don't need to take that step yet into care. I just need a hand, a helping hand. By the time she needed it, and I see this when we talk about neighbor force with our clients, by the time you need it, you have a different appreciation for it. It was a different kind of help, but she was very thankful by then to have it. But it is that there's that stepping off when you really get into pure
More
care.
professionals.
It's that
Yes.
acknowledgement that, gosh, yeah, I'm at this age and health that I need care.
I know in talking to many of my clients that it is can be a hard transition for folks. You just don't want the people around, even like they want the help, but they don't let these like strangers and other people around. And one of my tips of advice is to start first with the stuff that's less personal.
Yeah.
So the laundry, the yard work, the pets, walking the dogs, and housekeeping, grocery errands and stuff like that, because then they get used to having the people potentially around. And I want to talk to this kind of all is leading up to like asking for help and where you saw a need. You saw this need between like family and home care.
Yeah.
How did this big idea come about for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I always say this, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, my mother was the, impetus for this invention. But when I was going through it with my mom, I was looking for some backup, because I thought she would feel better. She wasn't always asking me, and it was going to take a little bit off of my plate. But what I found was there really was nothing other than family, friends, and maybe neighbors in EIGHBRS that could step in. Because when I started looking in the care space, one, I think she would have said, I don't need that yet. And she didn't, to be honest. She did not need an aide in her home for 4 to 8 hours a day. We needed somebody to get her to the beauty parlor. That was a 1.5 hour ordeal, right? Or all those little things. And I even went on care.com, because I thought, wait, this is an on-demand marketplace for care helpers. Well, care.com is great, but it's when you need a care worker. And you can make that investment of time, because if you say I need somebody on Thursday for 2 hours, they're going to give you 20 different people, different rates. You've got to negotiate with them. And invariably what I found was I'd find somebody and they'd say, oh, well, I am available for 2 hour window, but only if you commit to 20 hours a week. And by the way, I'm not available this Thursday. And that just didn't work.
Oh, so you're a recruiter, and you've got to like ask questions and
No.
negotiate. And yeah, that's a whole other set of tasks that you had no time for.
I did that when we finally got a care worker, and I got her from care.com, by the way. She was amazing, and she was with us for 2 years, but that didn't solve my problem. I just kept thinking, like, I want to push a button and another person like me shows up, the other me.
A clone.
Almost like Uber. Like, this is simple stuff. Anyway, we got through it. And so after she passed away, I moved cities. I had lived in Richmond my whole life, and I just needed a little bit of a fresh start. Now both of my parents are gone. My daughter had gone off to college. And so I moved to Washington, D.C., had this great job in investment banking. But while I was there, I saw my friends starting to do this, and again, it's not a bad thing, but it's not an easy thing. And there's no book, what to expect when your parents are aging, until you
And there's no time to read the book.
Correct. What do you do?
Like we had 9 months while we were making a baby potentially to
Everybody, oh yeah, they don't tell you what to do after the baby comes out either. But
exactly. Yeah.
So, I saw my friends going through it. A couple of articles, like there was one in the Wall Street Journal that piqued my interest. And the headline is, I used to have it framed in here, America's running out of family caregivers just when it needs them most, and talked about all that demographic shift, which I thought, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, now it's a business problem, right? Like now it's a societal problem where we're outnumbered. There's more people who needs care than there are physical people.
And, the number of family caregivers, I have one daughter. I'm the end of the baby boomer generation there. Who's going to take care of me? Yeah. So, that was an eye opener. And then literally 2 things happened that all of a sudden, it was a light bulb. I know the answer to what I needed with my mom. And so I'm living in DC. I wanted to get involved in the community. I'd lived in Richmond my whole life. I was very active. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll sign up for Meals on Wheels. I have a soft spot for older people. And it's not a big commitment. So that sounds great. And I called them and they said, oh, we'd love to have you. Would you like to do every Wednesday or every Friday? Well, I couldn't commit to the same day every week because I traveled a lot for work. And that was a little disappointing. And I would say about a month later, I was talking to a friend of mine back in Richmond who used to be a lawyer. And she mentioned that she was driving for Uber every now and then. And I thought, what in the world? I didn't think she needed the money. And she said, Paige, I left my law practice to finish raising our 2 teenage boys. They've now gone off to college. And she said, I don't want to go back to my law practice, but I wake up in the morning and I feel like I have no purpose. I'm used to taking care of people. I'm used to being needed, connected. And she said, I could get a part-time job, but honestly, at 53, I don't even want to commit to a part-time schedule. What I love about Uber is if I have an afternoon free, I can go out and just connect with people. And literally that was it, because I thought, I bet there are a lot of people that are not professional care workers. They're just compassionate people that if we could tap them when it suits them, they could step in and be kind of that backup daughter that I was looking for. And that's what we're doing.
I like, amazing. And you playing off the word neighbor. Your business name is Neighbor Force.
Yes, Neighbor Force. Our labor force are neighbors. And you talk about asking for help is hard, with your mom and so forth. What we try to get across is we all help each other all the time. We've always helped each other. Neighbors help neighbors. It's no different. And for the adult kids, sometimes they feel guilty. And I'll say, did your parents have help raising you? Sure. Did they get babysitters? Yes. Why? It let the parents take care of themselves as a couple and themselves, give them some time. It's the same thing, or did they have a neighbor down the street pick you up from soccer? Sure. We've always done this. Just because you need help doesn't mean you're helpless. So.
Right. And we're in a different age where it's more common that, a 2-person household are both working and to make the same amount and to live the same lifestyle of our parents in the past. So it's definitely more common. Go ahead. No, I just think it's such a great thing that, when caregivers, the alchemy of their situation is like you experienced something for yourself, you saw a business opportunity, and you've invented it. And it's a big idea, Paige. Like, I don't know if you realize that there was nothing else that I know of that is in between.
Really isn't.
For Uber, for transportation.
I think there's some small companies. There's a woman here in Richmond who has a band of 5 or 6 women that kind of do that. But in order to scale it, you need the technology that's making all this matching and giving the ultimate flexibility to the neighbor. And I had this, crazy idea that there was this network of neighbors, this neighbor force out there. I'm blown away by the neighbors. They're, generally college educated, empty nesters and retirees. 72% of them are over age 50. On average, they do it 2 or 3 times a week for an hour or 2. And we know that for the older adult, we're giving them some autonomy and letting them age in place if that's want, and we're taking a lot off of the family caregivers. But I think the neighbors get the most out of it. They love it, and they're making new friends, and it's helping them. So,
and to your point, it's like a win-win for everybody because they get to set their own schedule, put in the labor where and when they want, and at the same time, on the recipient end, do you still have the 1 hour minimum? Like that's
you
unique.
don't have to commit to anything.
Yeah.
Most of our client, we'll have people that use us, once a year for a doctor's appointment. And we have some people that we see every day for an hour or two. Maybe we're making lunch, maybe take them to the museum, to the beauty parlor, cleaning out the back bedroom because the grandkids are coming to visit, you name it, little bits of stuff. But our average client uses us twice a week, but they're not, there's no requirement.
If it's like, if you're a person who's just feeling like you're strapped and stressed with all of the action items, this is a great opportunity that you can kind of hand off pieces that doesn't require a lot of personal stuff in it, or like, it didn't have to be me. It could be anybody necessarily that's doing that thing. You've done the background checks, you've checked them out and so forth. So amazing. Where is NeighborForce available right now, Paige?
So we're mostly available on the Southeast from Maryland down through Georgia and Texas.
Okay.
It's continuing to grow.
Texas always has
time. Somebody in Charlotte, North Carolina might hear about NeighborForce, but their parents live in St. Louis, right? So, but we don't want to move too quickly because we need to make sure that we maintain this caliber of our neighbor. And early on, because we've had to raise outside capital really to fund the building and the technology, some people question if there were enough neighbors. And I would say, you don't think there are that many nice people in the world? And by the way, it's a growing demographic because our neighbors are Gen X and boomers. But, I look at Meals on Wheels, which is probably the closest proxy to what a neighbor is. Same kind of people. We do a joint events here in Richmond. They had 2 million volunteers last year.
Wow. And they're not getting paid. They're volunteered. You're paying your neighbors.
And you have to commit to the same day. It's great. They're a wonderful organization.
Yes.
So,
my mom used to volunteer for Meals on Wheels as well.
It's so
remember
rewarding.
That.
But this is a step further because you do get to start making connections. And we're not matching one specific neighbor to a client. Now, a lot of times organically, that will happen. Will they change their schedule so that they can always see Mr. Smith? But it's okay because every neighbor brings a little something different to the table.
Yeah, variety, spice of life. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, and you worked in corporate roles. What was that shift like for you? And working caregiver too to entrepreneurship? Was that how was that transition?
Oh, they said it's hard. I had no idea. It is hard. And for us, it's hard too, because it is, like you said, it's this white space. Don't even know to look for this because they think there's nothing out there. But, I think some of the skills that I had in the large corporate world help with the infrastructure. And, I think we're probably over engineered on infrastructure, but it's so important. So that part's good. I'm not a scrappy I'm not a serial founder, so a lot of that has been new.
Yeah, and the fundraising, I imagine I've dabbled in a piece of that with another company, and it's exhausting. Yes. Yeah. I see my husband doing it with he's got a.
But I'm involved in the startup community in Richmond, and I tell young entrepreneurs all the time, and now I've heard famous people say kind of the same thing. So maybe I didn't make it up, but like, if you don't have a driving passion to solve the problem that your company's addressing, don't do it. It just will get too hard. If you're just doing it because you want to, make money and go public or whatever it is, you won't make it.
Yeah. Good advice.
So driven to solve this problem.
And even then, like you can, I know for me, I've had the drive, but I've also realistically thought about quitting and flipping the table, so many times in the past.
I know.
Years.
Well, I say all the time now around the company, this is my poor English, but grammar on purpose. Now that we see how it's impacted so many lives, we can't not succeed.
Can't not do it is what I say. I can't not do it. Yeah.
We have no choice. We've got to make this work. And it's hard. It's hard.
If it were easy, I have a sign on my wall that says if it's easy, everyone would do it. So It's not
Yeah.
that easy. But you also, I love that you've got the financial background and want the proof kind of that there's more opportunity for people who want to get into this. And you had mentioned to me like a book that helped you in this. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, maybe it was The Longevity Economy. Is that the
Yes.
one? Yeah, I read this early on. It's written by
Joe Coughlin.
Joe Coughlin. He's a professor at MIT in their age tech lab. But in it, he talks about kind of this age wave and how we're going to solve this going forward. And he makes 3 points that literally, to me, are the case for neighbor force. Because he says, one, that today's boomers don't want senior living of the past, one size fits all. What they want to do is piece together different needs when they need it. So if you give up driving, in the gig economy, then maybe you get Uber. If you don't want to go grocery shopping, Instacart, all of those pieces, because everybody ages in different fits and starts. That's kind of neighbor force. And then he says that women solving caregiving challenges are going to be the innovators. Well, that's clearly me. And then thirdly, he says it's really got to be solved at the community level, which is what Neighbor Force is doing. We say we're bringing back the neighborhood. And he talks about the Village to Village network that was started in Beacon Hill in Boston, which is kind of the not-for-profit version of Neighbor Force. And it is kind of small grassroots groups, volunteers that get to help people age in place. We actually work with the villages.
Nice.
So we're not free, but we can do a lot more and be a lot more receptive than, say, the village can be responsive. Sometimes in the villages can be, and a lot of theirs is social based. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
I appreciate that. I'm learning about that longevity economy, and also, that you are kind of focused on the growth in the community aspect, which is not easy. I have, worked for 2 nonprofits, one Daughterhood, where we did, local Daughterhood circles. We did them in person for many years, but then we felt like we could really strive to do what we were doing virtually and potentially have not quite the connection, but more scale. So went that route. Of course, the pandemic kind of prompted that, but still working with with them virtually, doing one event a month, and then helping a community group called ACAP, Adult Children of Aging Parents. We've got different chapters here in the Atlanta area. Those are in person as well, and those are hard to scale, like at the program level. There's a whole team of people, but you're really kind of going out and you have a wonderful pool of potential laborers, which is really what I think is making it successful.
Yeah. Most of our neighbors are referred by another neighbor. They're talking about, I did this, had this greatest visit with this little man yesterday, and and then their friends say,
one of my friends in my book club is a neighbor, so
that's awesome.
Get to hear some of her stories. Yes. And made the connection for her with what I know about Neighbor Force. So that's amazing. Well, I want to switch gears and talk a bit about self-care. And you were in the sandwich generation, widower, caring for your mom and your daughter at the same time, like working full time. Like how did you, looking back, how did you survive it? How did you infuse little moments for yourself? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was hard. And we do a webinar about this. We've started, and, I think the first step, and when I look back, I didn't do that, is to even identify as a caregiver.
Yeah.
I think particularly for women, we're taught you just get everything done.
How do we change that? What's your thoughts? Do you have thoughts on how to change it?
Well, one of the things that we're finding is that the children of that adult daughter can see it. And you know what, Mom? There are resources for you. You don't have to do this all. And then, it's a little bit of a wake-up call, I'm just getting it done. This is what we do. And so I did, there was a point where I don't remember what, but I did realize that. And I ended up taking family medical leave for 6 weeks. I worked for a big bank at the time. So that was a benefit that not a lot of people have. And when I did it, I didn't tell my mother. She thought I was still going to work every day. But
Which
I
gave you
needed
some breathing room, which was
it
good.
gave me a little bit of breathing room. It was hard. I was in a production type job, but something had to give. And so I was very fortunate that I could do that. Now we talk about all the time. It's kind of like put your oxygen mask on before helping somebody else. You can't pour from an empty cup, and it's hard.
Yeah, it catches up with you, especially if it's, the average caregiver is a caregiver for 4.5 years. And that's
Yeah.
just, the average, like there's different scenarios. So we don't have a crystal ball of what it's going to take. And so
Right.
making our care team bigger and putting some habits, some healthy and happiness habits in place, I think can be critical.
Yeah. I mean, it's emotionally, physically, and you're seeing that your loved one's health declining. And, the realization there is hard as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're not alone, and, that it's okay to ask for help is so important.
Yeah, it's critical. It's critical to make it sustainable for sure. And
When you
asking
get
for help.
calls from potential clients, I'm telling you, we say that our team is kind of their, shrinks, but what they're looking for is validation that, yeah, it's okay. You shouldn't feel guilty. You're a great daughter or a great son doesn't mean just because you're looking for a little outside help. And I remember my husband and I getting marriage counseling years ago. Life was just very stressful. My daughter was young and we both had these demanding jobs. And this guy was great because we listed all the things that created stress in our life. And he said, which one of these can you outsource? So it was like cutting the grass. My husband loved to cut the grass, but it's something that every week, took up a couple of hours. And so, I kind of view neighbor force a little bit that way. Yeah, you might enjoy taking your mom to the beauty parlor or doing these things, but if somebody else can do that, then that gives you a little bit of a break. And then when you're together, you've got more, quality time.
Yeah.
It's not so rushed.
Yeah, go and enjoy the lunch or do those things. And I feel like sometimes too, like when the housekeepers comes or the lawn people, like it's almost like the cavalry is coming. And yeah, my husband recently had to mow the grass. And I just was like looking out the window and thinking, that's so nice that he doesn't have to do this that much anymore. It's been many, many years.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we've got to kind of figure that out. I consider what you're talking about here of asking for help one of the 8 categories of self-care. Like when I was really focused on self-care initially with my caring for my mom, I was really honed in on physical self-care, as I think that many caregivers are kind of thinking about, oh, I need to eat better, I need to exercise, and even maybe sleep comes a little bit later of how important that is. But there's so much more for that than that for caregivers. And asking for help is a practical self-care and emotional, social, like it wraps up a lot of different things.
It really does. And ultimately, I think it improves your relationship, with your loved one and your family. My family was small, but a lot of times I think, we'll see that the caregiver is spending so much time with the parent that they're kind of forsaking the relationship with the rest of their family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
That was somebody, there's certain kind of conversations in my past that kind of clicked for me as far as setting up some sustainable practices in place. And one of them was like a guy at work giving me the boundaries book and saying like, you should check this out. You might need some boundaries in your life. And then another one saying like, hey, I don't even remember who said it. You just remember what was said and saying, your parents have already lived this part of their life and you get to also, enjoy this chapter of your life, which, your kids are only going to be the age that they are. You're in peak earning years of your job. Like all of those things are essential for your future.
Yeah. And, it just made me think, because we keep talking about kids, but a lot of our clients are also the spouse,
Yes.
And I remember COVID was devastating for everybody for so many reasons. And we basically shut down for a couple of months and thought about providing virtual visits. But what we decided was our true value is that in-person human connection. You can't make a grilled cheese sandwich over Zoom. And we had a woman call right when we kind of started back up in tears. And she said, my husband has Parkinson's and I haven't left his side for 3 months. and I've got to get a little bit of life for myself. And so we started going once a week so she could go volunteer. Her daughter taught at a preschool, and she would go read at the preschool with her daughter. And it made such a difference in her life, that she started finding more. And all we were doing is making grilled cheese with Tom, right? Or something like that. And she even got to the point that they might have a family birthday party, let's say on a Saturday night. And she never knew his health was kind of up and down. And so she would book a neighbor for Saturday night. And she said, it may turn out that 15 minutes ahead of time that he's fine and I'll get to take him. But this is kind of this little insurance piece that if he's not, I've got someone there and it's worth it for me to pay for that 2 hours, even if I don't need him. Now that's pretty extreme, but that's how important it was to her to have
a backup plan. We need sometimes the ABC and so forth. And I totally get the volatile behavior, the cognitive things that can weigh into how even mobility, like on a rainy day, can be really tough for people. So glad that you pointed out the spousal, the help for them too, because I noticed, I live in Atlanta. My folks lived in Florida at the time when they were in our spiral year, we call it. But it, initially, maybe even a couple of years before that, it came into like my dad needing more help for my mom in particular. And we didn't have a neighbor force. We didn't have even a care.com, I don't think didn't exist back then. So we went to Craigslist. Remember Craigslist?
Oh yeah.
And we found some amazing people through Craigslist that became like family members for us to do all of those things. Like it was these simple things like, buying a watermelon and cutting it up into portions so that my parents could easily grab and go, take it out of the refrigerator, or cooking a ham or a thing of soup for the week or something like that, and following the family recipe to make that happen. So growing in the grocery store, like we definitely could have used neighbor force back in.
A little bit makes a big difference.
Makes a huge difference, especially for a remote caregiver. Like if somebody's got somebody living in the Southeast or Texas that lives even states away, or, but knows somebody that needs help, like that's peace of mind for somebody to put physical eyeballs.
Peace of mind can take a lot of emotional toll off.
Amazing.
No question about it.
For sure. For sure. Well, hopefully we're normalizing in this conversation, Paige, like asking for help. Like it is hard. It is hard for, like you said, the caregivers to self-identify, I feel like they wait until the crisis happens. So much like if we're talking to you, if you don't have anybody like in a backup plan or you're an expanded care team and it's all on you, like that is not sustainable. And I've never seen that work. So
no. It's funny. We work with home care companies a lot. We refer because our clients are aging every day. And there's one in Richmond who is the best, we think. But what they told us.
Do you want to shout them out? Because people are like,
sure. Commonwealth.
Okay.
They're Commonwise, excuse me. They're amazing. They're also in a couple other markets, but it's interesting what they said. And so they refer to us when people don't really need what they offer, and we refer to
or
them.
Need you for an hour, or less than the 4-hour minimum.
Correct.
Right.
And he'll say, and we do, and we recommend a lot of different ones, but they're the top one in Richmond. He'll say it's great to be the best, and they are, but for home care companies, you really want to be the first, because what happens is it's always a crisis, and when it's the first one they call. Okay, I got to get this solved. Let's move on, right? You want to be that first call.
Right. And I would tell people, like, whether it's home care or neighbor force or whatever, like, just get the paperwork going, like, fill it out, like, dip your foot in and test it out. Like when it's something that's not in the heat of the moment in the crisis, so that then you're like, it feels again, that peace of mind, like, oh, this worked out okay. Or maybe next time I'll mention that this and this need to happen and fine tune it a little bit, but like, you're never going to know if you don't kind of dip your toe in.
Exactly. No, it's always better to have a plan all the way through into senior living. Yeah.
What is self-care and like, how do you prioritize your health and happiness now? You're a busy entrepreneur, what's working for you right now? I'm the wrong
person to ask that question of. I'm not practicing what I preach.
I bet you are. Like, I bet there are some tadas in there if we look for them. Like, not necessarily the eating, but like socialization, financial, self-care.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I have some friends that are starting to retire. So the fact that I'm going full tilt, this energizes me, even though it's hard. So that's good. But here's a great example. It's a lot of stress and a lot of unknowns at this point in the company's,
Sure.
journey. And so I lived in a 115-year-old home, which I absolutely adored, but it was a constant source of stress. What's going to break today? And we're not talking about little things. So I sold my house, and last week I moved. And right now I'm in a very small apartment, about the fourth the size of my home, and I'm so happy. But that's something, that's something I could control.
How did you go through the processes? Like, people are doing this with, they're dealing with generational clutter, where like you've been passed down from people who have passed away, which I know you've had. Like, now you're going from this home to this place. Like, what was the process you used to figure out what to keep and what couldn't, or where to go?
Hard, and I did a pretty good job when my mom passed away, of really going through the key things that we wanted to keep. And so that part was easier. And I'm not a huge clutter person, but it's still shocking how much stuff we accumulate. So unfortunately, much of that is now in a storage unit. But my goal is to get through that so my daughter doesn't have to one day. But
yeah, that's a motivator for sure. Like, once we've lived it as a family caregiver, like, not reproducing this for us. When my folks moved from their large home to a 3-bedroom condo in Florida, I'm one of 6 kids, and it was kind of a unique way that we dealt with it. It was really kind of fun. We had one of those Post-it things with the different colored flags, like the little bitty ones, like in one set. And they had marked the things that were available that they weren't going to keep, the paintings, the furniture, rugs, whatever. And then we went in as kids, and my one brother was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want anything. I'm sure he regretted that. One that was kind of living with them, so there was really kind of 4 of us. And we went in and we had assigned colors, and we put our colors on the things if we wanted to, if we had an interest in them. And sometimes there was things that we all, the Victrola, we all wanted it. I'm kind of glad I don't have it now, but the Victrola is super cool. And so then we would draw cards. And it was like whoever had the highest card in the deck. And then afterwards, there was some kind of trading, but we called it the Showcase Showdown. It was really quite fun, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, my mother tried to get my brother and I to do it. And it was kind of, we were like, neither one of us want that.
Yeah. Well,
color that, Yeah.
Luckily, they had kind of reduced down to that, because then after my dad passed away, we had to move my mom and my brother. My mom's mobility was an issue. And so we would have to bring the things to her and say, what do you want to do with these? And like take action. It was exhausting. Well,
I'll tell you one of the things that my mother, I don't want to say hoarded because she used it, but she was obsessed with Christmas. It was the biggest holiday in her home. Obsessed with her Christmas tree. So I have all of her ornaments and wrapping packages. She would not buy Hallmark wrapping paper at the, drugstore. She would buy the stuff from the big department stores at the end of the year that were these giant rolls and all of the fancy ribbons and so forth.
Oh, wow.
And she died in 2014, and I still have some of that paper I'm using. And I have moved 4 times since she died, and I keep hauling it with me.
She's still involved. She's still involved.
Absolutely. And my daughter's like, everybody else has, snowmen all over their Christmas packages, but ours are always this beautiful paper with these fancy ribbons.
Aw, that's sweet how you kind of carry on the tradition too of that. And yet I know you'll be glad when the big rolls are gone, and then you're like, what kind of paper do I want to get? Yeah.
We're nearing the end, but the movers like, wait, we're moving. I was like, yes, we're moving that. So.
Well, a fine in between I find is like not quite drugstore and not what you're talking about. Costco. Costco has great wrapping paper, and I love their ribbons. Their wide ribbon. Like, I don't have to know how to do a bow. I just tie a knot, and it somehow looks pretty good.
Exactly, and then you crinkle it. Yep.
Yes.
I learned all that.
Well, I love it. Let's get your thoughts on some of the questions in the Just for You Daily Self-Care Journal page. So, if you could have only one self-care product on a desert island, what would you pick?
Music.
Okay. Are you do you have a playlist somewhere, or are you bringing a CD that's?
It depends on the mood. But yeah, I think for me, that can really speak to me. Yeah. I love music.
Yes, me too. And I made a note to share every now and then I mention the caregiver anthem playlist I've created. I've created a playlist with like where I hear songs and I'm like, this relates to caregiving in some way, or it
Interesting.
encourages caregivers. So I'll have
Yeah.
to
Well,
put
mine is
that.
like the Rolling Stones, which is not probably, although they do have a song called Neighbors.
There you go. Like play it at your next gathering, your next conference. But yeah, it could be things like um, rolling with the deep, or
Oh, yeah.
all of the different things. Like I'm like, oh, I don't know.
I Will Survive, Gloria
I will
Gaynor.
survive. Exactly. Like when you kind of go down this path, you're like, oh, these are all kind of making sense. What are two of your go-to healthy snacks?
Apples is definitely one of them. I don't eat a lot of healthy things, so that's hard for
That's
me.
good.
Yeah. I'm a big protein person, so low fat protein. I eat a lot of that. I
Okay.
think I get my energy, but
What are some examples of that?
oh,
Like,
tomatoes. We have these things in Virginia called Hanover tomatoes. We're famous for.
not for protein, but just to have them. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're very healthy. So
Yum. What's your source of protein? I always am trying to kind of get more protein in my diet.
nothing very fancy. It's chicken,
Okay.
fish, although not salmon usually. I love tuna and I love a good steak. So
Yes. Sounds
yeah.
yummy. You're making me hungry. Okay. Last
But I'm
question.
not known for my healthy eating habits. So I drink Diet Coke every morning from McDonald's.
Oh, yeah. I hear about these people and I've met these
I'm one of
people.
them.
What is
Every
it? What is it
single
about the
day.
diet? Listen, that's self-care. If that makes you feel some kind of
It
sense of
does. It starts
joy.
my day off, and then I move to decaf coffee. But it's something
Yeah.
about getting in the car and going there. And in fact, the lady at my little local McDonald's just told me last week that she's getting a job as a caregiver with a local care agency.
Nice. I mean, it's social self-care. It's like you're not having like deep conversations, but they know you, they rely on, it kind of gives you that boost. And for some reason, like people always mention McDonald's, like has having the right mix of carbonation, I guess, or the ice. What is
About
it?
it, yes. And the circumference of the straw. I don't know.
Huh. Well, I hope they
It
never
hits four
change it.
taste buds at the same time or something like that. But
Yeah. Way to go, McDonald's. Okay. Well, and how do you go there and not get the biscuit? That's my other
yeah,
question.
don't need the biscuit. Stick some eggs. Yes.
Yeah. What makes you feel nurtured, pampered, or just plain good? Maybe it is your Diet Coke. Yeah. But do you have anything else?
Yeah. I don't feel very pampered these days, but I think getting to spend time with my daughter is definitely one of them.
What do y'all like to do
She
together?
lives in Manhattan, so we do like to sneak in a little bit of travel every now and then. But the next thing we have planned is to see the Eagles at the Sphere in Las Vegas. So
Very cool. The Eagles. No, at first I went to sports team, but no, the Eagles, the band,
yeah,
which is one of my husband's favorites. So, well, that will be amazing. And I can relate. My daughter is 24, lives in Chicago. So we, try to do some travel or kind of at least have some things sprinkled throughout the year. So I know I'm going to see her because I just
yeah,
like her.
having things like that to look forward to, even not being there, but having something on the books is very calming.
Well, we're planning. I don't know if you saw in anything that I've shared about the self-care at sea cruise, but it's
Yeah, I
not
did.
not this year, but October 2025. We
Yeah.
sealed a good deal for caregivers, and we're looking for sponsorships, of course, for the different things. What could be the lanyards or the different things that we have there. But I'm excited because my daughter's coming with me,
Nice.
and she's got, she's a nurse, so she can kind of plan so her life gets chunk of time off there. But self-care seas cruise, we're going to do it with a bunch of different co hosts of mine that are
Yeah.
also in this care space. And what I love about it is that people can come for the respite, but leave
Mhm.
with the community and the resources. And that
Yeah.
jazzes me up.
That's tremendous. Yeah. That'll be
So we'll
huge.
see how it goes. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
an experiment. I hope it's amazing. I hope we
Yeah.
can plan other trips of respite and kind of bring caregivers together like that would be a fabulous thing.
The addressable market of potential attendees is limitless, as we know.
Yeah. I mean, even if you want to be just, if you're a cruiser, like you love cruises, we still got a good deal for you. We're not going to kick you out. So, and you don't have to come to all the caregiving stuff. It's completely optional. We don't have the whole boat. That's, of course, it's our Norwegian cruise line. There's lots of other people on there as well. Yeah. Cool. Well, amazing. Well, this has been great. Is there anything that you wish that we would talked about, Paige, or something that you're like, we can't leave without mentioning this? And then, of course, how do people connect with Neighbor Force and learn more?
Yeah. I can't think of anything. You've asked lots of great questions. And that caregiver, I guess I need to be caring for myself now, right? I kind of feel like I put that behind me, with my mom gone, but
even just in little micro minutes, like it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, but I will definitely be your cheerleader of saying
well, and I tried to let my daughter know that, it's coming, but she doesn't want to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. In terms of reaching Neighbor Force, we've got a website, obviously, and it's spelled like labor force, but with an N. Our neighbors are neighbors. They're your neighbors. And it gives you lots of good information there. But
is it neighborforce.com?
.com.
Okay, perfect.
But if people have questions, you can sign up, and what people think is you're taking some big step. There's no step, you set up an account and it takes about 3 minutes. And really all we need is your name, who we might be helping if it's not yourself. And then we put a little field in there that's optional, but it's kind of nice. So if you were signing up for a family member, you could have, and we say client notes, and any neighbor that would visit, say it's your mother, would see this to know about your mom. Now we have some people that write a lot, but
I might be one of those kind of people. Yeah.
If I were setting up an account for my mom, Joy, which we didn't talk about that. We say we're inspired by Joy. Her name was Joy. And that's what we're doing every day, is bringing joy to seniors. But if I were setting up her account, it would say, don't let the crazy cat run out the front door, and make sure her coffee is hot, because I spent years microwaving her already hot coffee for it to be piping hot. I'm
pretty sure our moms would have hung out, and my mom didn't like a full cup. She liked it like 3/4. And then you needed to kind of, top her off and make it, warm it up again.
Well, they gave me this thing at the office called the Ember that you can set the temperature of your coffee and it keeps it hot for you. So
is it a mug?
Uh-huh. And it has a
How
little.
How do you spell that? I got to find that.
EMBER, Ember.
Okay. I'm going to find that. That's for a coffee lover. That's a great, a terrific gift.
It's increased my productivity because I don't have to keep microwaving.
Amazing, Paige. Thank you so much for just having a beautiful brain and being a terrific, support for your family that then kind of blended all of this together. That's now a terrific resource for people who need help, and everybody needs help.
I mean, every day. Can I walk you? I saw Stephen walked when he was starting his. Hold on.
Okay.
I love to show people.
I like to see your office anyway. It's adorable.
We've got thousands of neighbors, but this is such a great, turn on the light. Gives you a great idea. Great way to end. Look at these neighbors.
I love that.
And as you can see, it's,
just people.
All kinds of
men, women, different ages, different ethnicities. Yep. Yes, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Paige, for sharing your story and being a part of our podcast episode today.
It was great. I appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do.
If you're a fan of this Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, then you're going to love Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast, which is also part of the Whole Care Network family. Join sisters JJ and Natalie, who offer a candid, unfiltered space to confess the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a caregiver. From heartfelt confessions to insightful guest interviews, they've got it covered. You'll laugh, cry, and everything in between. Tune into the Confessions of a Reluctant podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or visit confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com. Thanks for joining us today on the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast on the Whole Care Network. As always, show notes that accompany today's episode can be found on my website, happyhealthycaregiver.com. Just look under the podcast menu for today's episode image, and that will take you to the page with the links and information we spoke about today. You'll also find other resources on the website, along with links to purchase the Just For You Daily Self-Care Journal. When you purchase from my website, you'll get a signed copy and for a limited time, free shipping. If you've enjoyed what you heard today, consider subscribing to the show on your podcast platform. It really helps other family caregivers find the podcast, and you'll automatically receive our bi-weekly shows in your podcast listening queue. Maybe while you're subscribing, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review, or just simply talk it up on your social channels. Let's stay connected. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Happy Healthy Caregiver. And until we meet again, please take care of you.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.